Nobody wants to get united. Like, what we gotta do is meet everybody on 49th Street at the bench.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about tangents and the science behind them, what they are, how they affect your work, how you can avoid tangents. So what exactly is a tangent? A tangent describes the relationship between two forms or two lines, and this relationship results in your image looking more flat. Now that's a short version of it, but understand there is a ton of different tangents. Now there's no reason to make this topic any harder than it needs to be, so I'm going to show you guys the science behind tangents because then you'll understand and be able to see all tangents. However, I will provide links in the description down below to extra resources so you can do some more research. Now essentially what happens with a tangent in most cases is there's a conflict where the viewer can't tell what is overlapping what. For example, let's look at this little diagram right here. In this image you can't tell what overlaps what because the edges touch one another. This is often referred to as the fused edge or bump edge tangent. For example, my elbow, bam, now you're really aware of that edge of my frame because you know what, one tangent bumps into the other one or fuses into the other one. So because of relationships like this, you can't tell what overlaps what. Some common tangents you might run into is something like an antler tangent. I don't know why it was hard for me to say that word, but we got it. And that essentially, you know, it's gonna happen oftentimes with branches, trees, things of that sort where it just pops out from behind an object and it's like, well, where is that coming from? We don't ever get to see where that tree is connecting to the floor. Now obviously this can happen in nature, but this is where composition comes into play. It's the artist's job in order to contextualize the environment. Another super common tangent is the closed corner tangent, and you see this in a lot of amateur photography and a lot of children's drawings where they draw the sun in the top of their page. The reason this is a negative thing is because it really draws a lot of attention to that one specific corner. Not to mention the fact it's really hard to develop any substantial forms when you have most of your form cut off by the corner of your frame. So now not only do you have that form looking extremely flat, but now you have to consider that form's relationship to all of the other forms in your image, which now that that form is flat, it's gonna go ahead and lower the credibility of all the rest of your forms. And on top of that, still bringing a ton of attention to that corner, which brings attention to the frame. And the second you bring attention to the frame of your artwork, you're gonna have a super flat image. So this is why tangents are bad. This is kind of the science behind why these things aren't good for your artwork. But now the question becomes, how can we use tangents for good? Now this is where like my inner art nerd can flourish and bloom and just have a blast. Because now we have this thing called tangents, which we just talked about in length, that absolutely suck. They're a parasite for your art, like I said before, they just suck. But if we look at the principles of art, we learn a little bit about something called movement, as well as rhythm. Now these two things are important. For anybody who doesn't know, rhythm essentially gives you movement through repeated elements in your image. And repeated elements can be something as simple as a line, depending on the art form you're doing. And movement essentially is there to guide the viewer's eye in order to, once again, give you a sense of, well, movement. And it's something you'll see a lot in comic books where, say, like, Spider-Man will be throwing a punch or a superhero will be throwing a punch of some kind, and one line of their arm will go in a really exaggerated direction that will follow throughout their entire body. Now that line, that one line, or that one flow of motion can be broken up into multiple different lines throughout that same individual. And this is seen as a directional tangent, and it's even said in its definition that directional tangents can be used for good, which is why I'm letting you guys know about it. But this is really useful in order to create a sense of motion, which can really bring your images to life, regardless of whether you're doing something like photography or whether you're doing something like graffiti. This is actually really helpful for graffiti, and even something like comic books like we previously discussed, and you'll see this a lot in cartoons. Another great tangent, which oftentimes is actually really bad, is the bumped edge tangent, or the shared edge or fused edge tangent. As we discussed before, this is when two objects, boom, bump into one another and they share the same edge. As a result, you can't really tell their depth. However, in something like graffiti, if we erase a portion of that bumped edge tangent, we can go ahead and fuse our letters together, effectively connecting our letters. This is one of the easiest ways to connect your letters in graffiti. When you have line letter uniformity and similarity, you increase flow. And if you have a bumped edge tangent, those lines are pretty freaking similar. So the flow goes up, but the image gets flattened. That's the downside. But if we erased a little bit of that bumped edge, well, the flow still goes up, but the image doesn't get flattened because the shared edge or the bump edge tangent isn't there. And since we're on the topic of graffiti, and this is really important for just illustration, design, this is important for a lot of art forms, but I'm gonna use graffiti as kind of like the springboard for this. The corner tangent happens when you have one object that has two lines that come to a vertice, and there's a third line that interacts with that vertice, making it look flat. That's exactly what happens when graffiti artists put 3D on their letters. So you really want to make sure that when this happens, it is 100% on purpose and not an accidental thing, and it is not making your image look flat. Especially for graffiti, because 3D is meant to make your artwork look three-dimensional, which three-dimensional isn't flat. So anyway guys, I hope this video exposed you to tangents, I hope it opened your eyes to it, and I hope it helped you understand them a little bit better and a little bit easier. It's a pretty simple concept, it's pretty easy once you understand what they are and what to look out for. But once again, check out the links in the description. I have a bunch of resources for you guys in order to see what tangents look like, and read a little bit more into them, because like I said, there is way too many to cover in one video. Also, remember, today's video is part of an informational playlist that I'm coming out with. We are covering everything you can possibly need to know about graffiti, and it has a lot of tips for art in general as well, so I encourage you guys to watch this playlist. Guys, ladies and gentlemen, I hope the video helped you out a bunch. If you learned something, feel free to spread this knowledge around with your friends, you know, all that good stuff. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below. I'm in there all the time. I'm here to help you guys. So ask any questions you have down there. And if you're a new viewer, feel free to subscribe. We come out with consistent content every single week. I'll see you guys next time. Until then, peace.